Welcome in, everybody, to the Hawks Eye podcast. And today I'm going to be lucky enough to be joined by Dayna O'Gorman of Real Hawk Talk, of the Our Turf Football podcast, and also a writer for the Pro Football Association. So it's going to be great to have Dayna on to discuss kind of the whole offseason. I haven't talked to Dayna in a while. We're going to talk about what moves Seattle's made, some of the news that obviously came out of the league owners meeting this week, as well as an NFC West check-in and an NFC check-in as well on the entire conference to see, is Seattle better or worse than they were off last year coming into this opportunity to go back-to-back as Super Bowl champions. So before we get into that with Dayna, make sure if you guys haven't already, click that QR code up in the top corner. It'll take you over to the Hawks Eye Discord channel. That community is growing like crazy, so make sure you guys come and be a part of that, as well as where to follow, like, and subscribe to the channel to help this channel continue to grow. But besides that, and now that that's out of the way, we'll talk to Dayna right after this.
That's all we do, baby. It's our time.
This relentless Seattle defense continues to have a night. Their sixth sack.
First and 10 at the Seattle 44. Here comes the blitz. May. Kennedy tries to throw. Ball comes out. Going the other way. Turning up field. It's Shannon through. And he scores. Touchdown. Play faking in. Sanders going to roll left. Looking. Sam throw. Back in the end zone. Is it caught in? Back it in. Touchdown. Seahawks.
We did not care. It's always been about us and what we do. And now we're going to the Super Bowl.
All right, everyone. And like I promised, Dayna O'Gorman is here to join us on the Hawks Eye today. Dayna, it's been a while. How have you been?
I mean, I'm really good, right? We're still riding this high of the Super Bowl win and of what I think has been a really good offseason. And so, everything is really great at being a Seahawks fan right now. I normally at this time of year, I switch out. I have a little flag in front of my house and I go, Seahawks during the season. And then after the Super Bowl, I usually switch it over to my soccer team, my Sporting Kansas City that I like so much. That Seahawks flag has not come down and I don't think it's going to this year. I'm pretty excited.
Well, it's kind of one of those fun things where until next year's Super Bowl is played, and if anybody else is crowned, we are the best team in the NFL until someone knocks us off that pedestal. And I don't know if anyone's going to knock us off. We've got a pretty good chance to do something that we did last time, which is go back to the big game. So we'll get into that conversation a little bit later in the show, Dayna. But some Seahawks news and stuff that obviously came out. DeAnthony Bell got re-signed and is apparently going to get a Super Bowl ring, which I think is awesome by the team because that was so unfortunate. He didn't make it back because the Panthers had to claim him for all of 1 week and then to lose their playoff game. It made no sense to me. But the discussion at the league meeting that I thought that was interesting was this discussion on going to 18 games. And it's kind of an interesting one because, as we know, the NFL is this massive Mongol of a media entertainment industry. They basically run it. They're a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and they want to get as much money as they possibly can. You look at this year, the Seahawks are starting their season on a Wednesday because of the fact that the Rams and 49ers are playing in Australia on Thursday. What are your, first off, before I tell you what I know about an 18-game schedule, I want to get your thoughts. What do you think of this discussion that's now going on with the NFL?
So interestingly enough, this conversation has been going on for years, right? We have known that the NFL has been trying to expand to more and more games, and what I believe eventually take over the whole year. I really do at some point. But years ago, I think it was the 2020 Pro Bowl, I believe is when it was. So January, before the whole world shut down. I was at the Pro Bowl and they were still having games then, right? So they were still having practices and that sort of thing. And one of the questions I asked the players while I was there is, what do you feel about expanding the season? Because they hadn't even gone to 17 at that point. And their reaction was really strong to even add one more game. And a lot of them talked about needing a second bye week or changing the schedule up and this, that, and the other. And that was just for adding one. So I can't imagine they would be too thrilled about adding yet another and going to 18 without some major adjustments. I don't know that extending the season gives us better games. I don't know that it gives us a better product on the field. I don't think that this is something that will actually enhance anything but ticket revenue, right? Now, I am a football fan. I love football. I love to watch football. And so it's not that I don't want to see these games, but is it going to be for the betterment of the game? I have some real questions there, and I'm sure that the players are not happy about this either. I think it could be done, but I think there would have to be some major schedule adjustments.
Yeah, and so that's the interesting thing for me. So being up here in Canada, there's the CFL, and the CFL actually runs an 18-game season. They play 18 games, but they stretch it out over a 21-week schedule, basically. So one thing that comes out of the CFL, there's no all-star game. They don't have a Pro Bowl. They don't have any of that stuff. They just name their all-star team at the end of the year for each conference, basically, and then that's it. Hey, you made the all-star team. Congratulations. Here's an extra bonus for you. They only do 2 preseason games. The season starts early, so it actually goes from basically the end of May. Training camp starts in like a month here for the CFL, and the games end in November. So like you were saying, schedule kind of changes a bit, but they're able to do it. And the rules they have in place, one is you can't play off. You can only play an early game, like a what would be the equivalent of like a Thursday night game in the NFL. You would only be allowed to play that coming off of a bye.
Okay.
So you cannot do it where it's like, okay, you've been playing, like, no, the only way you're playing Thursday night is off a bye week. And so that's something that I think you could maybe do to entice the players. Now, I'll say this, I'm all for more football as well. But the thing I look at the NFL where it's a little bit different than the CFL is the development of players, right? A lot of the guys that come to the CFL have played a couple years in the NFL. Like they're more pros at that point than guys coming right out of college. And so when I think about the lack of development we've seen in Seattle, particularly up until last year with offensive line and just the general thing about drafts and how offensive linemen, you hear John Schneider talk about and other GMs, they're not developed enough. Well, we've already cut out one preseason game, which was a developmental game for a lot of these depth players. If you cut out another one and now you're only down to 2, how are these guys getting developed and how are they actually getting their bodies conditioned into football shape? Because the other advocate, I'd say the problem with this is you don't have the same type of practices you used to that helped you into football shape.
Right.
The pounding and the physical endurance that takes on your body. A lot of these guys don't do that anymore because of the CPA, and it helps with player health and all that. Now you want to basically almost undo that by going to this extra game. One thing I heard that was interesting was like a load management thing where players would only be allowed to play 17 of the 18. And so if there was a point where, oh, hey, JSN can't play in this big crucial game because he's maxed out his 17 games, now your product's getting affected that way. I don't know if there's a real solid way for the NFL to approach this properly.
Well, and I think one other thing that we need to keep in mind, talking about the developmental aspect of it, as you were too, I think what we need to keep in mind too is they keep making the offseason shorter, or the let's say those preseason games. And yet, so then do they turn and automatically then extend required practices prior? So like earlier into July, do we go into June to keep into that? Well, then you're going to run up against the NFLPA and what the players are going to allow within their contract season. So then you can turn around and do it on the back end, which we have to remember, they are extending this season already. They've already had this in the works because the Super Bowl is not until Valentine's Day next year. That's a full week later. Well, just about a week later. And so they're already stretching it. And then you don't get the break for the Super Bowl teams, or do you still get a break for Super Bowl teams? Then you have to discuss TV rights with the NBA, with hockey, with everyone. So there's a huge maneuvering that has to happen here for it to even make sense on the player side, and then also on the rest of the league side and how they can make that happen. The other caveat to that is this. The plan is to eventually have 16 games internationally. Every team will play at least one international game. Okay. So then you have to schedule around that. That can be a scheduling nightmare too. So then how do you make that happen? Do you have multiple international games in different international cities on the same weekend? Like all of these things come into play. So You can't tell me, Bryce, that they haven't already worked the majority of that out for them to start talking about it at this level.
Oh, they probably have. And they just, again, this is where I get so frustrated with the NFL and the owners in a way. Because again, we know that these guys are multi-billionaires and they love their money and they will find the easiest way to collect that money. And I feel like, again, it's one of those things where they're not taking into consideration as much as they should the toll of the player. It's like, okay, cool. We just get this draft class that keeps coming every year. And they'll like, no, that's not how it works, because the drafted players, they're not superstars yet. People pay to see superstars. If the Seahawks draft a receiver this year in the 4th round, they're not looking like, fans aren't going to be all giddy. Yeah, they'll be happy, but they still want to see JSN. Well, are we taking into consideration the toll on the elite players in our league when they do these international games and the travel on them? Like, to me, with the international, that's its own separate topic for me, because I look at the international games and I go, it's too much. Like, it was okay when it was one game in London. And like, I remember back, like, and again, this is going back in the 90s, like, I remember Terrell Davis getting his big break because of the preseason game they had in Japan.
Right.
And you played a preseason game. Okay, preseason's different. It's a different animal in its own right. If you want to do an international game for preseason, cool, because some of those guys that you're going to see in the preseason will not be on your active roster. And I get it's still an NFL game for the international fans. But trying to have each team play an international game, it just seems absolutely ridiculous in the fact of the travel, the wear and tear, and the quality of the product you are now producing. Like, you don't see the English Premier League soccer every team plays an international game in North America. Like, it doesn't happen. Like, it's like the odd time they get a friendly where they play like the LA Galaxy or Kansas City is kind of a one-off. It's not, okay, well, we know that every team from Arsenal, Man U, Man City, they're all going to come over to North America and play a game at some point in their season. So why does the NFL need to do that? It just, to me, it's one of those things where you're getting too big and eventually the balloon's going to burst. And when it bursts, it's not going to look good. It's going to look very bad when it does.
We have seen that already in some of those international games. They're some of the worst games of the season as they come out, right? And because the product is so watered down. And that's my true worry, is that if you want to keep this at an elite level, you have to be careful how you go about this. That includes going to an 18-game season. That includes going to 16 international games. All of these aspects, we have to make sure, which is something, now I understand that I'm delusional for thinking, but we have to think beyond the money on this, and I know that that's not really what's going to happen. But at the same time, then there'll have to be the compromise. The NFLPA will have to commit. There's going to be a lot that's going to happen, I think, over the next couple of years. But at some point, the NFL can say, well, if you guys don't want to play, we will find someone who will, unfortunately. So we'll see what happens. It could get real interesting.
It will. And I'll say this, as much as I despise the Rams and the 49ers, like every Seahawks fan, I still think that's a disservice to them and them having to play that particular division game, because you're taking a divisional game away from fans, which they love to go to. Like, I'll be honest, divisional games, like, it's cool when you get the Eagles coming into town or one of these one-off teams in Seattle. But when it's the 49ers or it's the Rams, it's a big deal. People love going to that game because of the rivalry and the stakes that are at place in those games. And now you've taken that away from both Rams and 49ers fans, because as we know, SoFi is a neutral stadium in the NFL, and you get such a conglomerate of fans that come there. And the 49er fans, I think Kyle Shanahan even mentioned today, he's annoyed because it's like a second home game for them anyways. You've now taken that away from the fans that, honestly, in my opinion, deserve it more to have that opportunity to go see their team play. That you want to do the Rams versus the Broncos in Australia? Cool, go do it. Rams and 49ers, like, I as much as it pains me to say it, like, I feel bad for those two fan bases that they don't actually get to enjoy that matchup in one of the two stadiums in California. So another interesting thing, Seattle gets to be on Hard Knocks this year. And I want to get your thoughts, because it seems like it's a very mixed bag right now amongst Seahawk fans about whether they want to have it or they don't want to have that access to their team.
I don't watch Hard Knocks. I'll just admit it. I watched the first few seasons, and then they get to where they start cutting players, and it guts me, and I can't watch it anymore. I'm such a softie, right? Like, I can't handle it. I'm like, but he worked so hard. I would keep them all. That's just the way I am. But the interesting thing for me is that my friend Patty brought this up to me today. She sent me a text and she was like, isn't Hard Knocks for the bad teams? She's like, what are they doing putting the Seahawks and the Patriots? So I think they're trying to change that stigma a little bit, that only bad teams end up on Hard Knocks. But also we have to keep in mind that every team is required to do it at some point, and the Seahawks have really pushed it off for a long time. So maybe John Schneider looked at it and said, well, not really much is going to happen for them this year. So go ahead. We have the same team, the same coaches, everyone's got, you know what I mean? And so maybe he decided this was the year. But at the same time, I think it's fine. I think that, I don't think that it gives other teams any information about a team. They're very careful about that stuff. And you know what? I'm okay with it. Just nothing else, bringing the Seahawks into more people's, line of sight. Even after winning the Super Bowl, I feel like the Seahawks are a completely forgotten team. I had a coworker, I worked with her for 6 years. She goes, oh yeah, didn't your football team win the Super Bowl? Like, yeah, they did, because they just are forgotten, right? And so I don't know. I think it'll be fine. I have HBO Max, so I might watch it, but it would make me a little nervous.
Well, I think Buffalo was the first team that made the playoffs. I could be wrong, but we're the first team to make the playoffs after being on Hard Knocks, because they were on it last year. They made the playoffs. Unfortunately, they lost, but it's crazy to me to think Hard Knocks has been going on for 25 years, right? Like, it goes back to the 2001 Baltimore Ravens with like Shannon Sharp and Tony Saragusa and Ray Lewis and that Elvis Gerback at quarterback. Like, that is the team that first started this. To think that we're now here. So, like, to your point, like, the Seattle Seahawks have been able to push it off for a quarter of a century right now. Like, okay, we're doing it after we won the Super Bowl. Okay. The thing that'll be interesting for me is, I wonder how different it would have been if we got to see inside a Pete Carroll team versus a Mike McDonald team. Because especially when you do, like, when you see the inside them talking about how they're scheming stuff, and it would have been really interesting to have that comparison between the two. I'm going to be interested. The thing for me that I'm going to be most interested in is the Brian Fleury parts, where you see him installing offense and like the quarterback meeting rooms with Sam Darnold and Drew Lock and Milroe and Cooper Kupp. Like, I think it'll be fascinating to see Kupp, because he always talks about how he meets with the quarterbacks. I'm more interested in that. Like, the practice stuff, I go to the training camp. I see what they do on the practice field. I've seen it before. It's the stuff inside the building I'm a little more interested in, the coaching aspect of it and how it all comes together and how much of a, nerd Mike McDonald is, especially when it comes to defense, and just seeing how that goes and that whole process is. Right. That's what I'll be interested in. The cutting part is going to suck. I agree with you. I hate when I see it. Like, I remember watching the Vegas one and or the Oakland one and watching Luke Wilson get cut. That was awful. Right. And it was like, okay, like, but I think it'll be interesting. I'm glad they're doing it after the Super Bowl. I think it's, one of those things where it's like, okay, we're coming off our high of our Super Bowl. We still have that. So if somehow we get jinxed by the Hard Knocks bad juju, it's like, okay, we still at least have won our Super Bowl kind of a thing. Right. I think it'll be okay.
I think one thing that'll be interesting is you look at the personalities on this team, and when you go watch the Hard Knocks, they usually focus in on the super big personalities. Well, we have a lot of big personalities that are very professional. So I don't know that they're going to get what they think they're going to get, except for out of maybe Devin Witherspoon. I think Devin Witherspoon is going to explode as a star in the league after this, because people are going to see even more of him. So I think that'll be interesting. The head coach, Mike he's not a gregarious guy. You know what I mean? So I don't know how much of that they're going to see, but I think it'll be interesting. It'll give a different view. That same friend that texts me, she goes, well, I miss, and you guys will all remember this, I miss the Real Rob Report. And and then she threw in John Moffat. She goes, remember John Moffat used to be, I'm like, oh my God, that's a name I haven't heard in a really long time. But, and that was fun to see that inside. That was a little more casual than Hard Knocks is going to be, but it might be nice to see that again.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. And so one other little tidbit here that Brady Henderson just dropped about an hour ago, I guess Roger Goodell is answering questions at the media portion of the league owner meetings. And basically he was talking about the Seahawks sale. And all he said, and as a direct quote, they hired a bank and they are going to work. And there's a great deal of interest in that. That's all I know at this stage. I'm still under the belief with the Seahawks sale, I don't expect Seattle to be sold this year. I think this may take till next January for it to all come together and all the pieces, because two things I think are key in this. Jody telling John to just go for it and let it rip, and John even saying that on his, radio show,
Yep.
tells me of an owner that doesn't expect to exactly be out of the owner's chair anytime soon. Kind of some of the contracts they've obviously given out in the offseason here, JSN, Rashid Shaheed, and a lot of those. I expect this process to take a while because I think Jody's going to be in that group with Falcon and all that are going to be very, very diligent in who they eventually choose to replace them as the owners of the Seattle Seahawks. Because one thing I'll say about the Allen family is they understand the value this team has to the city and the region. And they want to make sure, I think, whoever comes in to replace them will understand that value as well and kind of uphold that going forward.
So these are completely my own thoughts and opinions. I have no insight anyway, other than what we have all read. They're keeping this so tight-lipped. So I don't want anyone to think that I know something I don't know. But my thoughts are this. Number one, I agree with you. I think if the team is not sold by the beginning of training camp, this team won't be sold through the season. They will just keep it through, roll it in. It'll be sold. It'll be announced probably after the Super Bowl next year, right? Because remember, that wasn't supposed to come out till after the Super Bowl this year, so that it was even going to be sold. The second is that the Trailblazers sold. So therefore, and that was approved. So therefore, 1/2 of that requirement of the will is from Paul Allen has been fulfilled. So they are moving forward. And I think that is a huge thing there too. But more importantly, the one thing that I keep reminding people who are completely panicked about this, and I understand the panic. I understand, especially, I lived in Seattle when the Sonics left. I get it, right? I understand what happened. And so, but my difference in this is that I agree with you 100%. I think there's going to be some more due diligence done in this sale. And I think that for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is not for profit. This is not for someone who is trying to become a billionaire. She's got that. This money is all going to go to charity and trust and all the things. So this is not a personal gain for her or this group. And I think that is a huge part of this that hasn't always been talked about. The second thing is that she understands the fear of the fans. And so I'm hoping with that. Now, billionaires live in their own world. And so we could all be way wrong. She could sell it to whoever comes up first. We don't know. We don't know. But that's not the impression I get. That is not my feeling here. So I think it's going to be kind of a slow roll to see it. My only true fear is I really hope, and I think the NFL has to prove this, I worry about, because I am a fan of the Premier League, you see how some of those sales go, and they go to huge conglomerates and big groups that come in, and then they disagree and they can't function in all of these groups and that sort of thing. And that is worrisome to me that something like that would happen, because this is a lot of money, and rarely only a handful of people can have that. One person could have that much money. So a lot of times it's a group. So I worry about that aspect of it, but I'm not overly concerned about the sale.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things for me where I'm not either. And I'll be honest, Dayna, for me, no matter who comes in and purchases this team, it's almost like one of those things where it's like, yeah, you'll never really be the owner of the Seattle Seahawks. Like for me, it'll always be the Allen family as like the identifying factor with the Seattle Seahawks organization, because if Paul Allen hadn't come in, this team doesn't exist.
Right. 100%.
They are gone. They're in Anaheim or California or whoever knows, wherever else they may have ended up. So for me, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, come here and you can be the de facto on a piece of paper named as the owner, but the Allen family will always be like with the Seahawks in my mind. Like I'll never probably remember the owner. I'll probably call him something Allen at some point on a podcast. I know it'll happen because for me, it's always going to be the Allen family, from Paul to Jody to that whole group. It's just kind of, the same thing with the 12s being assimilated with the Seahawks, right? They're the same thing. Right. Number 12, immediate thing comes to mind is Seattle Seahawks fans.
Yep.
Allen family and Seattle Seahawks will be one and the same at the same point. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. One last thing we'll talk about here, Dayna, before we get into the offseason recap. Why does the national media seem to ignore the fact that we won the Super Bowl? Like, I heard Hawk blogger Brian was down there at the league meetings, basically said, like, Mike McDonald's sitting at the table and there's like no big media around, all around the Giants and John Harbaugh there and the Cowboys with Schottenheimer and stuff. Like, we just won the Super Bowl, but it's like, again, we're this team up in the Pacific Northwest. No one really cares about us. We won. Oh yeah, they did their thing, whatever. It's like, when are we ever going to get the recognition that we are one of the top franchises in the NFL?
Never. Listen, this is just the way it is. I, honest to God, think the Seahawks would have to win 3 Super Bowls in a row. I think they'd have to win 3, and not even 2 will get them the respect that it got the Chiefs or any of the. I think that there is something about this team, and there's a couple of ideas I have about this. First and foremost is this year, this team that won very quietly, right? The defense was amazing, and we know how dominant they were, and you can look at the stats, but to the average fan and who national media caters to, it was pretty quiet win. The fact that they beat, the Rams twice, and we can talk about that here in a little bit, but because I about had it with Sean McVay, but I think that they just kind of quietly won. And so, and I will tell you this, it's living here in Kansas City, and I've lived here for 25 years. So I have a ton of friends, and they're all Chiefs fans. All of them were like, the minute that we won and it was going to be the Patriots and the Seahawks, they're like, you guys have this. It was a foregone conclusion. No one was even too worried about the Patriots, which makes me feel bad for the Patriots a little bit. Just a little bit though. But I think that, so then there was some loss of momentum there to a certain extent. But, I think it's going to be interesting to see if they do really well again, if, knock on all the wood, they can repeat. I think that the noise will change for a little bit. But to be honest with you, this is a cool, calm, and collected team. And cool, calm, and collected teams don't really make news.
And what's interesting to me in a way is I feel like the 2013, because Sherm was so loud, because that Michael Bennett was so loud, they kind of stood out more. And to your point about this team being kind of quiet, and like, even think of Russell Wilson. They win the Super Bowl, and Russell's this big name, and he's coming on as this, hot rookie young quarterback in the NFL. And Sam Darnold's kind of like this afterthought, like, oh yeah, okay, Sam Darnold actually won us. Like, whoa, hold on here. Sam Darnold, who you all wanted to throw onto the I-5 in a trash bag, national media, he just won a Super Bowl and did something no other quarterback's done in NFL history, not even Tom Brady,
right?
Which is go to 2 separate teams and win 14 games in back-to-back seasons and then win a Super Bowl, playing as a top 10 quarterback. But none of that gets talked about enough. It's like, this is the one thing I kind of like about Sam Darnold in a way, is like, he's disappeared. He doesn't exist on the national media market right now. Like, he's just no idea where Sam Darnold is. He's just working with quarterback coach or whatever he's doing, but there's no media around this team. Like, you don't hear, like, JSN's the biggest thing because he went to a UFC fight and signed his new deal. That's about it. You haven't heard about anybody else on this team, really.
It's interesting. It's so true. And I think a lot of this has to do with Mike McDonald too, because, he's not going to give you a 2-minute long answer to a 3-word answer. He's not that guy. I will tell you, at the combine this year. So the coaches came out, and Mike McDonald was out there, and there was, like last year at the combine when he came out, it was literally local media and me. Like, there wasn't much going on there. But you had, the Lions and the Patriots, and you had Jim Harbaugh, all these people were there at the same time. So I kind of understood it. This year, it was at the same time he was up there talking, it was him and Mookin from the Cleveland Browns. And then they also, I felt so bad for Vrabel. But anyway, he would just look like he'd been gut punched. I felt so bad for that guy. But anyway, so we're sitting there and we're talking, and there was a little more media around him. But then after they're done at their podiums, they split off and they have these little mini sessions with just the local media. Around Mike McDonald was the normal local media, right? You got Brian, you got Bob, you got John, you got all the regulars, right? For the Cleveland scrum, there was probably 60 people around that guy. And why is that? Because there's news to be had there. He's a new coach. And I think that's part of it. Mike McDonald's not going to give you a headline. We're lucky we got the one quote we did. We did not care. We're lucky we got that. But I just don't think that this team has, I don't want to say charisma, because we know they do, but not in a way that necessarily draws enough attention to the Pacific Northwest.
And I think that's kind of what is so interesting, because Pete kind of fed off of that, I think, a little bit, right? Pete was an emotional coach. It's what he thrived in. Mike is the opposite. He's very analytical, calculated. Let me go to work. Like, he even said, I think it was on the Kay Adams show. Yeah, it's the first time 5 days ago he watched the Super Bowl. Yeah. Like, he hasn't watched it since. And she's like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, because I can't switch my coach brain off. Like, there's plays in there that we should have got to the flat better. We shouldn't have given up the touchdown passes. And like, she even said, she's like, you're sick. And he's like, yes, I basically admits it. He's like, yeah, I am. I absolutely love the game. And this is where it's so interesting to me to see how this defense of the Super Bowl will go this time around, because you don't have those drama-filled obstacles like you did in 2014 coming off of that initial one, because you knew the Russell Wilson contract was eventually going to come up in the following offseason. You had all this other stuff. He was going through his divorce. Golden Tate was gone. Did Golden Tate get involved with Russell's ex-wife and all this other stuff?
God,
and Percy Harvin was a nightmare. Like, it goes on, right? Of like just how many obstacles that team had to overcome to get back to that Super Bowl. I just don't see that for this team. I think this team's biggest obstacle will be, okay, we've got a new offensive coordinator in place. How do we gel? How do you basically get better than what you were last year? And to be honest, I even think if they played at the same level they did last year throughout this season, they'd probably find themselves close to being back in that NFC Championship game.
Yeah. So this offseason, I think, was a lot of fake panic in my view, and a lot of quiet victories for the Seahawks this year, right? So what it was for me is that the panic over losing Ken Walker. And let me tell you how excited my Chiefs friends are to have Ken Walker in their locker room. I think that has been, that's hugely underrated. They're like, please save our quarterback. He's dying, right? Like, so they're so excited he's here. But I think there was a lot of panic over him leaving. And so when I look at this offseason, the way they played throughout the entire season is completely replicable. Like, they can do it again. They can replicate that. Then even without Ken Walker, even with the couple of guys they've lost. And now let me say this. It is very hard to keep up that high level of a defense. We know this, right? We've seen it in the past. It's very, very difficult. But when you bring back every starter you had, and these guys are still playing, they're not, on a crutch. God, I love Bobby Wagner so much, but the dude, he's on a crutch at this point, right? And so he's not at that. These guys are young. They're good. D-Law is really the only one anyone's worried about retiring. It doesn't look like he's going anywhere. So I think that is, they can do that again. The biggest competition that this team will have is their own division. And that makes me so happy, because we know this division, right? And so that makes me really excited. So yeah, if we're going to move into the offseason, I really do think that I have been very pleased at how quiet and calm and silently successful that this offseason has been for the Seahawks.
And I think one thing that goes under the radar with this offseason, to your point, Dayna, is they didn't lose their depth. That's what happened in 2014. They lost a lot of their depth pieces. They got gutted, right? Mm-hmm. You didn't lose that. You kept your depth. You lost, and we'll bring it up right now because it's a perfect segue into our offseason recap. So we'll start with the offseason moves here. And I'll just take this and this off the screen here. But you look at this from the Seattle perspective, you got Rodney Thomas, Emmanuel Wilson, DeAnthony Bell comes back as, a player that we had last year and got re-signed. We've got Noah. Oh gosh, this is going to be my first time trying to pronounce this. I've been practicing. Igabanogany, I think is how you say it. I'm close. I may be wrong. Yes. And then you look at the re-signings. That is a massive list of guys that we re-signed and kept in Seattle. And the departures we have are all starter level players except for Derek Young. Everybody else you were able to keep in the building at those depth positions. And I think one of the sneakiest signings is going to be Josh Jones at tackle. That they were able to get him back, because we all kind of forget a little bit. He had to come in and play that night rivals game versus the Rams at left tackle in that massive home game that we needed to beat the Rams in, and held his own versus Jared Verse and Byron Young and that Rams edge group, and played like a 3-game stretch for Charles Cross when he was out, and played well up until that playoff game.
He did,
where we finally got Charles Cross back. I expected him to sign a starter deal somewhere. Like someone was going to be like, hey, here's a 2-year deal. Come be our starting left tackle, and we'll see how it goes, because he's still a relatively young player. To get him back, and you already have Amari Kite, who was an undrafted free agent signing last year, who also showed that he could potentially play as a swing tackle. Like, this is the kind of stuff that championship teams do, which is don't let your depth get out of the building.
Well, actually, to be honest with you, it's kind of the opposite. Championship teams usually don't get the opportunity to do this. And I think that is what people need to focus on. I can see in the chat, people are like, but we lost 3,000 snaps. We lost 2 starters. Yes, we lost Ken Walker. And that was terrible. But you have to remember Ken Walker, who I love. Don't get me wrong. I think he's an amazing running back. I think he's going to do so well in Kansas City. But his ascent in the playoffs was directly in correlation to an injury to Zach, right? And so to Sharps. And they would have split those. And so I think that is something, it was easy to see his ascent because they needed to use him, and he did a beautiful job and he rose to the occasion. And I'm so grateful to him. So grateful for that. The others, tell me if you were surprised at any of these other players that left. Kobe Bryant, maybe. But I think he wanted a true starting position, and he wasn't going to get that in this team. Boye Mafe was not a starter. He might be for the Bengals. I think he'll do well in that system. Reek Woolen, nobody should be surprised at that. Not anyone. I hoped we would keep him, but I'm not surprised that they didn't. Did you hear Mike McDonald say, "Oh, we didn't let him go. We just couldn't afford him"? I don't really think that's true, but I'm just going to let that go. But thank you, Mike. It was very well done. And then, Derek Young. And so I think that, and Young went to the Raiders because I think that, they knew, or, Kubiak knew that he wanted him. He was a talented player. So I think that's a good spot for him. But like you said, it is way more important to see who stayed. I will tell you my biggest surprises of who stayed. Obviously, Rashid. I thought he was going to Vegas. I thought for sure he's going to follow Kubiak again, and he was going to end up in Vegas. That blew my brain when they re-signed him. I was thrilled about that. And then probably Josh Jobe and Josh Jones. They were both very surprising, but I was thrilled Brady Russell came back too because I love Brady Russell. So.
Why am I not surprised he's one of your favorite players there, Dayna?
He's a little wacky.
And this is what I look at, like, with this team is, out of that list of guys that departed, I expected when Kobe Bryant didn't re-sign at the same time of Abe Lucas, and that report from Brady Henderson came out saying they tried to, and Kobe wanted to bet on himself. And I realized at that point, I was like, I love Kobe Bryant. I was like, Kobe's going to test the market. Kobe's going to see his worth, and he's going to go get starter level money somewhere else. Because I think as much as Seattle loved, and Mike McDonald loved Kobe Bryant and how he was a starter on this defense and he played very well, I didn't see the drop off when Ty Okada had to come in.
Right.
And when you don't see the drop off, that's significant. Like, we can go back and look at what happened when Earl Thomas came out, and we saw the Steven Terrell era, and we saw the Tedrick Thompson and Delano Hill era in Seattle. And it was like, oh boy, like, please don't ever get hurt again, Cam or Earl. Like, we cannot afford for you guys not to be in there because it's such a drop off to, okay, we lost Julian Love. Ty Okada had to play. Kobe got hurt. I think it was for one game or for half a game, and Ty went in and played well. Like, you didn't feel the drop off. The defense didn't all of a sudden fall off a cliff. And so when I realized Kobe was probably gone and everyone else on that list, Derek Young was the one I was actually surprised about the most, to be honest with you, because I figured, he'll probably come back. He's been in Seattle for a while. He'll probably come back. Outside of that, I expected every single one of them to be gone. I expected Ken to be gone, in the offseason. I had Greg Bell on, who basically said, like, when he talked to Ken at the Super Bowl, Ken basically, and without saying it, kind of alluded to he was gone. Yeah. Like, he knew he
wants to be the only number one back, and he's not going to get that in Seattle.
And I think this is where it's going to get really interesting for Ken, because I do think he's a timeshare back. I don't think he's a back that can take 75%, of the carries for an offense, because when Seattle ever did seem to try and put that load on him in prior years, nagging small tissue injuries would develop. There was the ankle, there was the knee, there were different things. There was the hamstring. There was other things that popped up, and Ken couldn't play. They finally put him in a timeshare with Sharps, and he's able to play. Sharps gets injured, and because he's still fresh enough, has an amazing playoff run. And I love Ken Walker, and I'm glad he got his money. Like, I'm so happy for him. But I'm also happy Seattle didn't pay that money, because I was going, don't pay that. Like, that's not what you pay. And then to the point you brought up, like, Boye and Mafe, you look at the team he went to in Cincinnati, like, they massively
They need him
overpaid.
desperately.
They need him desperately, but like I think they also overpaid, as Cincinnati definitely does. And then you get Reek Woolen, and I look at Reek and I go, when Mike makes that comment, and I feel like Reek's moment of pure, he's not coming back to Seattle, was in the NFC Championship game, where you take that penalty and the ref goes to Mike, and I bet you Mike McDonald is sitting there and he's going, I really wish at that particular moment I wasn't mic'd up. Because I feel like for Mike in that moment, he's in such a coach mode and he's just like, yeah, I know it's 27. And it was just like, oh, I do not want to be on that sideline if I'm wearing number 27 as my jersey. And then to get beat the freaking next play by Puka Nacua for a long ball touchdown, which is something Reek was supposed to be really good at because of his speed and his length and all those things, that I feel truly sealed his fate. So again, those are starter players, but then you go to the re-signing list and you look at all the depth that was kept. Brandon Peely, Chaz Surratt, AJ Finley, who was having a very good training camp and preseason up until that injury. And then you look at the additions. You reinforced your safety depth. You went and hedged. Like, in my opinion, the additions are hedges against the draft, as they should be.
100%. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I will say you forgot Bobo on your list. I'm very excited. Bobo's back. I just want to put that out there for everybody.
I forgot Bobo. Sorry.
No, he's fine. He was a restricted free agent, so it's not quite the same. But yeah, I was like, I'm thrilled that Bobo was back. But I think that this does 100% go hand in hand with the draft. You are absolutely right about that, because this is not an exciting draft. And John Schneider even kind of alluded to it, and when he was having his press conference at the Combine. And then in some interviews later, it's like, yeah, we're looking to 27. So when you look at these contracts that they're getting and what they're doing, they are completely loading this for the future. They are not worried about 26. And I think that's why, as a Seahawks fan, I am so mellow about this offseason. I feel like they are going to roll into 26 exactly, God forbid, injuries show up. But I think they're going to roll into that knowing that they have almost no draft picks. They'll end up with more. How many? I don't know, but they'll end up with more. But they have just this tiny little bit of draft picks that then they're going to fill in a few more spots. If they don't get what they want in the draft, they can then look at the secondary free agent cycle that will come through. And so I think that will all become just hedging through this season, but they know who they are. They have their core and they're very happy with what they have.
And to me, I think for John, it's kind of what they did last year. And I said this, I've said this since they won the Super Bowl. It was a year ahead of schedule, I think, in the plan.
It was.
I think this year was supposed to be the year coming up was, okay, this is the moment we're going to open the Super Bowl window and we're going through. And it was like all of a sudden they jumped the gun and we're like, no, we're going to do it now. We're just going to barge and blow off the hinges off the door and the window. And we're just going through right now. And being in that window a year early affords you the opportunity to, like you said, have a mellow offseason after the Super Bowl and go, yeah, we're looking at a better draft class in 2027. That's where we're going to prioritize things. If we need to refill the cupboards more, it's going to be in that draft class. Yeah. And we have enough talent this year to defend our title as Super Bowl champions. Like, I don't look at Seattle's roster and go, I won't say it's the same level, because you did lose some great players.
You did, definitely.
So you do take a little bit of a step back, but I don't look at it and go, okay, yes, you're worse than last year's team, but you're not that much worse. It's like going in your percentage, like, oh, you missed one question, so you dropped from a 90 to an 88. It's like, yeah, I'm still within that same area. Like, I'm good. I'm not falling off that much. So, but where we saw a lot more change, Dayna, was this coaching staff.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, again, we're looking for another offensive coordinator to call plays for this team. What did you make of the hire of Brian Fleury? Because it's kind of this one that none of us, I think, expected, because Brady Henderson and Greg Bell said at Mike McDonald's kind of media presser right after the Super Bowl that, hey, they were starting their internal, interviews with Justin Outen, and it's going to happen quick, and they're probably going to hire someone. So I was like, okay, it's Jake Peetz or Justin Outen.
Right.
One of those two is going to get it. And, they mentioned Janoco, but I was like, I think Janoco's gone to Vegas with Clint.
Right.
But then they come and throw this big curveball of Brian Fleury, who was a guy I had on my list the year before. What did you make of it all?
So to be honest with you, I was like, wait, who? Wait, who? Like, I literally had to go look it up. Like, I knew the name. I had heard it bantered around, never seriously. And then the explosion after he was hired of 49ers people going, how did they let him walk out the door? How did they let him go to Seattle? Where the hell did this come from? All of this. And I was like, wait, who? I need to look a little bit into this guy. And after doing that, he seems to match the coaching style, if you can have a style, of Mike Macdonald very well. Serious, really, and not like a crazy jokester. We get that out of Aiden Birdie. We don't need another one like that, and I think that this is going to be an interesting fit. But something that Mike Macdonald said, I think is going to be really important, is that he said, we know what our offense is. We know how we want to run it. And Brian is going to run that. And that to me is a huge departure from the first year of Mike Macdonald, who was so focused, so focused on defense. He let, the offense just kind of careen off. And we saw what happened in that dumpster fire. Pulled it back in last year, was in lockstep with Kubiak. But he said, we know. That means that he's taken some ownership of that. And I think that's going to be hugely important here, going into yet another offensive coordinator. But I am not worried about this position in any way, shape, or form.
It's really interesting. So I've done a real big deep dive into the, I'll call it the Mike Shanahan, even though people call it Kyle Shanahan, but I'll really go Mike Shanahan, Kyle offense, and the Kubiak one, because I wanted to understand the differences, because we keep hearing they're like cousins. They're the same. And McVay's kind of gone off and done his own thing off of this tree. And him and O'Connell are more tied together in what they do offensively. Like the principles are the same, but there's quite a bit different with it. So I really went this offseason and dove into it. There are some very, very stark differences between the style of plays and the way they do things. And I think personally, Brian Fleury and what he is going to bring from being under Kyle for 7 years, which again is more than Clint was, I think he might actually bring us a better offense than what we saw last year. And the reason I'll say that is their run game is, again, wide zone, but there's things that they do with motion that we didn't see last year. And I think it's very key when you listen to even Brian Fleury's introductory press conference, where he says, yeah, there's stuff that Clint did that we'll keep doing, which is the base stuff. But then he goes, there's stuff that Clint didn't know that we did, and other things that we've done since Clint was gone that's worked really well for us. And that's where I think you'll see a little bit of a pivot, where you might see guys like a Jake Bobo being more impactful in the offense this year than maybe he was last year because of what his skill set is. And you'll see guys like Rashid Shaheed get more involved in other ways that they weren't last year. Because the one thing I think we all kind of saw with Kubiak a little bit was there'd be moments where our offense was flying and then it hit like a wall and it would kind of
hesitation.
Yeah. And we all thought it was on Sam, especially after that Rams game where Sam threw the 4 interceptions and everything. It was like, oh, they did this massive rein in. I think there's also limitations to what Clint does with his offense, where I think with Brian Fleury's experience with Kyle and growing up in that system, like really that is his system that he understands the best. Being an ex-quarterback, playing, and coaching tight ends, I think there's going to be a different level to our passing game that we didn't see last year. Because the one thing I'll say is but Kyle and Mike Shanahan, their play action pass game, even McVay is not on that level yet with them. Like there's things that McVay does that are really special in the drop back game, and I love. But there's things that Kyle does and Mike did with Elway and that group with Denver in the play action game that we didn't get to see, where I'm thinking of like JSN and I'm thinking of Shaheed, and if Torrey Horton's healthy, where I go, man, I don't know how Cooper Kupp gets on the field. Maybe him and Bobo pair up on the field when we're running the ball like that, because there's just things that you can do with the speed that they're going to have at their disposal and what he can do with the tight ends. Like you look at all the tight ends he's coached in San Francisco, even guys outside of George Kittle, that he has improved and made better. I look at Elijah Arroyo and Eric Saubert and what their skill set, even Nick Callerup, and what he could potentially become in this offense is kind of interesting. So I'm with you. I'm very excited to see what Fleury does. But there are some other things. Obviously, Daniel Stern, this kind of past game strategist that they've brought in that Mike McDonald's really excited about, and Jimmy Dougherty, who they brought in from University of Washington, and Thomas Hammock, the running back coach. Like, and now we found out that really Coach Polamalu was fired last year, just very politely fired. I'm very interested on this offensive staff because you kept John Benton, you kept Justin Outen. Like, you've got so much knowledge. You kept Jake Peach. Like, you got so much knowledge on this offensive staff that I think this offense may explode this year in ways that we didn't see last year.
Yeah, I think there'll be changes and probably changes, like you said, for the better for sure. Because there were definitely hiccups, right? Like, the defense was rocking, but then sometimes you're like, ugh, about the offense a little bit. But what I think is really interesting too, in all of this change, is you had Otten, you had Pete, you had all these guys who were in the conversation for an OC. They didn't get the job and they stayed. They didn't get mad. And you see that sometimes in these coaching changes, which means they have all bought in. And so I think that we talked about culture till we were ad nauseum, right? With Pete Carroll. I think the culture that is being built here is one of collaboration on a level we haven't seen before. Pete was amazing. Wasn't really a collaborator. It was his way or the highway. And that's always the way Pete, and it worked for a long time until it didn't. This is a different level. Mike McDonald has made this so collaborative and bring in the great minds and listen to them that I think that when you look at these guys who've taken over these coaching positions, these are all people that he obviously trusts to bring the right type of energy and vibe. And like you said, years of experience into to see how they work. It's going to be great. I'm not worried about the coaching staff in any way.
I think they've made it better. Like, overall, I think they've made it better. And the other thing I really like about Mike, Dana, again, that I think doesn't get talked enough about is his willingness to accept maybe he doesn't have the answer, or he doesn't have someone that does on his staff, and go and get that person that may be outside of his circle, where we knew Pete wasn't that type of person. Like, the biggest outside hire for Pete was Shane Waldron. Like, that was like, whoa, we went outside the circle of Pete Carroll to get Shane Waldron and Andy Dickerson. It was like, really? Like, you know, and that's where, for me, I'm like, now it's very different, where we're kind of this, you know, he always talks about chasing edges. He really means it in every aspect of what we do. Like, I'm going to go get the tight ends coach from the 49ers because of this, and this. I'm going to go get this young pass game strategist out of Baltimore. And I think the other thing he's done really well in this offensive staff, Dana, is he's layered himself for departures now. Jim Dougherty, coming on from Washington, is a guy that's got 24 years of coaching offense at the collegiate level. Now, I get everyone has paused because they go, oh my God, Ryan Grubb 2.0. Different, yeah. Much different. You're bringing him in as an offensive assistant. You're bringing him in as somebody to learn the game, not give over play calling to, but maybe layering yourself for, hey, 2 years, Brian Fleury may get in a head coaching opportunity somewhere. It's a possibility, right? If this offense explodes and we see Sam Darnold have an MVP season potentially, all of a sudden Brian Fleury is the next hot name on the coaching market because he has an innovative, you know, offense.
Right.
It's those type of things where I look at Mike and I go, he's always preparing. He's 3 steps ahead of everybody else now, rather than where I felt at some points with Pete. And again, love Pete Carroll.
Well, sure, but he was perfect.
Always and he was always, it always seemed we were chasing a little bit after those Super Bowl years. We were chasing the draft. We were chasing the innovative style of play that was going on in the NFL. And it's kind of nice, to be honest, to have one of those genius coaches, especially on the defensive side, because I remember when we hired Mike McDonald, a lot of people were like, why didn't we go after Ben Johnson? We need the innovative head coach that's on the offensive side. And we're going to be turning through offensive coordinators. And I get that. That's still a thing. We're turning through offensive coordinators. It is happening. But we also have the guy that's got the mind to shut down the 2 best offensive minds in the NFL within our own division.
Right. Absolutely.
So with that being said, Dana, let's talk about our NFC West friends and the 49ers and the Rams. And I guess we can talk about the Cardinals. Yeah, friends. I'll put it that way, friends. Let's start with the Cardinals. What have you made of their offseason?
They're dumpster fire. I mean, kudos to him for getting rid of Kyler. I mean, it was 2 years too late, but okay. I think they're going to be exactly where I think they're at least 3 to 4 drafts away from really contending, especially in this division. It would take a miracle to completely turn them around. Now, I mean, to be honest with you, they have so many holes. Putting any more level of talent in those holes might be, bump them up a few wins. But the Cardinals, I think that I don't know. I just feel like the ownership group, the coaching, it's a mess down there, and they haven't been able to figure it out in a really long time.
I will say this about the Cardinals offseason. I think they're finally doing the right thing. They're finally kind of committing to, we're not good. We're not going to be good next year.
Right. They're complete rebuild. Yes.
We're complete rebuilding.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've got the young coach in Mike LaFleur. We're not doing anything crazy at the quarterback position. We're not, they didn't go and spend money on someone or, any of those things. It's like, hey, Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, you're going to run this team for us this year. We're going to embrace the fact that we are a dumpster fire, but we're going to kind of start taking the fire extinguisher and putting out the dumpster fire little by little to get back to being a competitive football team. Because there was a point when Bruce Arians was there and Carson Palmer and that group of players, they gave us problems, and they almost made it to a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. But ever since Bruce Arians left, that team has lost its identity. Right. It's lost its way, because he brought a level of, I think, stability to that organization that they haven't had. Cliff Kingsbury was not the answer. They tried the young hip head coach, just no. And then you went with, Gannon, and, if you don't take the bus, I need guys that are going to take the bus to work every day, guys. Like, you multi-billionaires, get your butt on transit and take public transit. Like, come on. Like, you made yourself a laughingstock. Like, you could honestly say the Cardinals, to a point, kind of became like the Cleveland Browns, New York Jets of the NFC division, or conference, I should say. But I think they're finally handling things. I still think ownership's a mess. I think the Bidwell family needs to give up the team and give it to somebody else. But at least they're starting to identify that they are a dumpster fire. Now, how do we turn this dumpster fire into something that's manageable and can eventually be fixed?
Right.
That's what they've kind of got to figure out.
I think that's a really good point. They acknowledge their crap, and so they have to fix the crap. And and kudos to them for doing that. It's going to take them a while, but we'll see. Kind of, I don't know. We'll see. I literally cannot wrap my brain around the way that they have functioned as a team the last 3 or 4 years, and so it's really hard for me to see a light at the end of the tunnel for them anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly. So let's now move to the 49ers. They went out and they kind of the 49ers, to me, feel like Humpty Dumpty, and they just haven't fell off the wall yet. And they're just kind of sitting there rocking back and forth, and they've got all these cracks in their eggshell that's forming. And it's just like, okay, just fall off the wall and smash into a million pieces and pull yourself back together again, kind of a thing. Because, okay, we're going to go spend money on Mike Evans. Okay, great. You're going to put that player around, and I'll just put in bunny ears, the substation conspiracy theory. And you can't figure out what you're doing with Trent Williams. Like,
he's gone, I'm sure. But yeah.
It just, to me, that organization seems so internally in the front office dysfunctional right now that they can't figure out what direction they want to go. And they just keep doubling down on, we'll be back to the Super Bowl. Like, look how close we were last year. It's like, you weren't really close. You beat up a bad Philadelphia team in a game you really, based on how beat up your team is, shouldn't have won. Philly should have beat them, realistically, in my opinion, but Philly was so bad last year at points. And then you get completely smacked. And they'll say, well, look at the last game of the regular season. It was 13-6. Yeah, okay. We basically were toying with our food. It was like a lion kind of just toying with, a wounded gazelle in the African safari there. Like, we knew we were going to beat you. It was just like, do we really have to whoop you that bad? And then we, in turn, did that to you in the divisional round.
So I think, sorry, hold on. I am so sorry. I was trying so hard not to cough. Hold on. All right. So sorry. Allergies are killing me. I'm so sorry. So I think that you need to look at the rest of the NFC West almost in a bubble. So I think that you need to look at them as the Seahawks, the Rams, and the Niners together. And this is why I do this, is because they were 3 teams with 12 wins or more. Insane. unheard of in a division, right? When it happens, it has a tendency to happen in this division, but it's not very often. And you look at, their win-loss percentage from home and away. The Rams really struggled away. Seattle did well at home and did really well away. Like, they had all these variations. But here's where I think that the Niners kind of stick out, and not in a good way, from everyone else, is if you look at their net points. So if you look at net points for the Seahawks, it's 191 net points. So 191 is their net points. The Rams, 172. The Niners, 66. And this is where you start to see those stat differences. Yes, they managed to squeak out those wins a couple of times. They managed to have a really good season, even with their injuries, which are god awful. I don't know. That is the wildest. I call it being Shanahan. I swear to God, the whole team's Shanahan's. But anyway, and so I think that is where you start to see those splits a little bit, even though it looks like they're all super good and all right at the top. The Niners are definitely lagging behind to a certain extent. Now, I think part of the problem with that team is the arrogance that they can fix it with who they have. They have one of the oldest teams in the league, and then they go get Mike Evans. And I love Mike Evans. He's a fantastic player. Should have stayed in Tampa. I don't know what he is doing, right? And so we need him to come to San Francisco on a really old team already that's totally injury prone. No, it does not make sense. Now, they don't always make the most logical, but they're good. Shanahan is good enough to get them there, but it's the fact that they just can't hang with the rest of them. And I think that Seattle being so good this year, it was a huge push for the Rams. I mean, let's admit, Sean McVay lost his damn mind, right? And that the Seattle Seahawks had the audacity to beat them. I mean, come on. The Niners, I kind of expected the same out of them, and you don't really get that same feeling like we were just this close, because you weren't. You were this close, right? When you really get into things, I think it's such a huge difference. But if you look at it, this division will still be the best division in football again next year. Without question, they're going to beat the other 11 crap out of each other, and it's going to be tight. I think that on paper, we always say everything over at Our Turf Football, we always say everything looks shiny on paper. But on paper, all three of these teams should be as good as they were last year. The Rams may be even a little better with coming in with McDuffie and a few other tweaks. Depends on if their quarterback can stay healthy, which so impressive. Matt Stafford made it through the whole season. I called him out as soon as I was going to call Aaron Rodgers out. So that was impressive to me. But, they have a few issues coming up, and then they have personality and personnel issues with Puka still getting in so much trouble. And they have his contract now looming. Thank you, JSN's contract. So I think that there is a lot of things, but this division still should just be tight. And I am very tired of 49ers fans saying, well, if we weren't injured, you're always injured. So just let that go. And then the utter audacity of Sean McVay to bitch about a 2-point play for the entire offseason, and then to bring it up at the owners meeting during Mike McDonald's press conference again, just shows me what a petty little man he is. Right. And so I used to really like Sean McVay. I've lost all respect for him at this point. And on the screensaver of my computer is him screaming into his play sheet, because it just makes me happy.
I'll say this though. There's two iconic things from that playoff run that I will hold in infamy is, well, not a playoff run, but leading into it, is John Lynch losing his mind on the 3rd and 17 run by Ken Walker in the last game of the regular season. And then Sean McVay screaming into his play sheet in the NFC Championship game. Those will forever be my favorite images of a Seahawks season.
There's the best meme out there. It's a little girl sitting in a museum, and these two giant pictures in front of her, and they're those two pictures. I love it. It makes me so happy. But I think a lot of this ties back to actually what you were saying earlier. The Seahawks team was a year early. The team they got and everything, this was ahead of schedule. And I really think the Rams thought they had one more year in them to get the best of their division and be able to run it through to the Super Bowl. And let me tell you, had the Seahawks not been the Seahawks, they would have run away with this, right? They were without question the second best team in football. And the true Super Bowl was the NFC Championship. But at the same time, with the ridiculousness of all of it, and in the the chasing of Seattle now. I think of the two teams, the Rams will do a better job of doing it, but I think that they just feel more urgency, and I just don't get a sense of urgency out of the 49ers.
So it's interesting for me. Like, everyone's talking about how the Rams are the early favorites to win the Super Bowl. At least national media started that conversation already.
Go ahead. We were supposed to win 7 games. It's fine.
Yeah, no kidding, right? We were only supposed to win 7 games. But to me, I look at it, and I was going to tell you this off the air, but I'll say it now anyways. I think the Rams might regress because and this is where I think some people, and I'm sure there'll be Rams fans who will see this and think I'm an idiot and all that, but this is where I look at it from. I go, like, Matthew Stafford's season was an anomaly last year. His MVP season, like, complete anomaly. Stayed healthy, played out of his mind, was so good. Not going to take that away from him, but it doesn't fit the consistency of what his career has been in a lot of ways. So you're banking on that. You're banking on Puka Nacua not becoming a complete and utter distraction, plus his, whole contract situation and everything going on with that. You got a situation where even I think Devontae Adams is kind of going like, what the hell? You were trying to trade me for AJ Brown and stuff. So, like, what's going on there? You've got a roster on the offensive side that is kind of aging a little bit. Now, they've gone out and got corners. 2 guys the Chiefs, of all teams, were willing to part with. A team that needs defensive help for Patrick Mahomes. Like, let's not forget that. Like, the Chiefs weren't exactly this defensive juggernaut, and we're going, oh, yeah, they've got guys that are going to replace McDuffie, and I can't even remember the other guy. I think it's Wallen or whatever his name is, the other corner that they signed. And I'm going like, and you're all giddy in LA about the fact that you paid McDuffie all this money. And I look at McDuffie and Witherspoon, I go, Witherspoon can play inside outside. I don't think McDuffie's that great of an outside corner. So you basically have massively overpaid for a guy that's truly a slot that you're going to play outside, and took the other chief corner that they didn't even make an attempt to re-sign and plaster this like you've done this amazing job at rebuilding your defense. And I'm sitting there going like, and this is a team that you're saying is going to be better than a Seattle team that, yes, lost starters, but I don't look at a single starter on Seattle that they lost and go, oh my God, we are screwed that we lost that individual. And so this is where I look at that little bit of regression. And again, I still think that doesn't mean the Rams are all of a sudden going to only win 7 games.
No, they're going to be very good again. Yeah.
They're going to be good, but I don't think they'll be as good as they were last year. And I think it'll be easier for Seattle to be as good as they were last year than it will be for the Rams to be as good as they were last year.
It's fair. I can totally see that. Yeah. We'll have to see what happens in the draft for them, but this is not a strong draft. So,
and that's the thing with the Rams. They don't do a lot of, they do have moments where they do draft some really good players, but it's not like where they make a lot of their hay. They do that in trades and free agency and so on. I don't think they have that strong of a free agency this year. I mean, and then you look at the 49ers, like, again, I love Mike Evans. I'm so sad that he's going there. And,
me too.
And I'm like, again, you have so much money on an aging defense in Fred Warner and Nick Bosa and all these pieces. And it's like, again, you got completely had the doors blown off you by the Seattle Seahawks in a game where Sam Darnold was playing with such a bad oblique injury that he was getting basically shot up to play because it was so painful. And he goes out and plays the game, and you have Brock Purdy running around behind the line of scrimmage for 400 yards before he can get rid of a ball. Like, what have you done to get and close that gap? Like you did, like, you're right. The 3 teams are in a bubble of their own. And yes, the Niners will be better than the majority of the NFC, and same with the Rams. But the thing that Seattle has going for them is they're the youngest, and they're still ascending. I don't think we've seen the best version yet, even though we just won a freaking Super Bowl. I still don't think we've seen the best version yet of how dominant this team can really be, because we're only getting into year 3 of Mike Macdonald. And you look at how the first year of that defense went. He basically had to reinstall it halfway through that year with the new linebackers. And we got Ernest and we got Tyrese Knight. And we got to see what it looked like when they all played in the offseason together and got to train together and do that whole thing. I don't think guys are going to miss, non-mandatory things. I think you're going to see all those guys there again. But if, for example, Julian Love stays healthy for a whole year, and all these guys that missed time throughout that season stay healthy for a whole year, this team could be even scarier going forward. and you're not having Sam learn a new offense. Even though he's on a new OC, it's the same offense. It's the same reads, it's the same concepts with players now that he'll have an offseason to work with JSN, knowing how JSN with Rashid Shaheed, who we haven't seen him really get an ability to connect with. If Torrey Horton comes back healthy, Elijah Royal will be in year 2. And here's the other thing I love about it. You are returning your entire offensive line, depth and starters from last year, with the best offensive line coach we've had in Seattle, probably since, in my opinion, Howard Mudd was our, offensive line coach.
Yes. Wow.
So, there's a lot of things where I look at Seattle and I go, we didn't lose a whole bunch in our coaching staff. Yes, we lost 3 coaches and they went to other places, but we also didn't replace them with people that can't coach.
Right.
So that's where I see this regression from everyone else, and where Seattle will regress, but still their floor will be the same as it was, which I think is 12 or 13 wins again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And I do think when you look at the NFC as a whole, this division still sets the standard. And those 3 teams really set the standard above almost anyone else at that point. And so we'll just have to see how it all comes together. But I think what you said is absolutely correct. When you look at it on paper, again, because everything changes throughout the season, injuries and all kinds of stuff. Because if I hear, well, Fred Warner, I don't want to hear about Fred Warner anymore. But if, on paper, these 3 teams, you line them up the way they got them, I still think Seattle has the edge. And that sounds a little homerish, but I just think it's going to be as tight of an edge as it was this year. But I still think they have the edge.
And I think Seattle will have the edge 3 years from now, because they're not getting, they'll get older, but they're still so young as a group.
So young. Yeah.
And that's where it's going to be really interesting. But when we look, let's move a little bit here and we'll do a quick overcap of the entire NFC, Dayna, because I know we've got a couple of comments in here that we want to get to. And if you guys want to have your comments in, make sure you get your super chats in. And me and Dayna will get to those here shortly. But when you look at the entire NFC, is there anybody really that you think rivals Seattle outside of the division that you go, yeah, you know what? Maybe that's a team that we see in the NFC Championship game this year or in the playoffs or something like that will give Seattle a run on paper right now?
There's a couple of teams that are intriguing to me, and I'm going to start with the Chicago Bears. I was so impressed with the huge jump that the Bears made last year that I can see them making an additional jump. Those players being together longer, Ben Johnson being there a little longer, all of the things that you need kind of at that point. I don't know that they'll rival Seattle, but I think that's going to be a big team to watch and to see how they ascend and how they do, because you have to remember, they beat some good teams and then they almost had the Rams. I mean, it was a good one. I like that. I like what they're doing in Chicago. I think that could really just kind of keep moving forward a little bit. I have a lot of questions about the Eagles. They won 11 games last year. I don't know that they're going to be better. I don't know what to expect out of Jalen Hurts anymore. And so I think that's part of my issue. But I think that if it's tweaked properly and their coach is crazy enough to do some weird stuff, that they could be interesting. I do think that no. The answer is no. I mean, it's really, I think outside of the Bears, the Lions, depending on their health, I think that's a huge thing for the Lions, but I think we need a lot more out of them. But otherwise, excuse me, no, I don't think there's anyone that even can touch those 3. And I think the rest of the league knows it. Now, depending on what happens in some more free agency, there could be some good ones. But I think right now, I have no faith in the Cowboys. I think the Giants will be better, especially if Scatterbo plays longer. I think that will be good. I think that team is under John Harbaugh is going to look very different, not different enough quite yet, but I do think that they will be different. I also, I don't get what the Packers are doing right now when you look into some of the stuff that they're doing. So no, when you look at the NFC, I don't have a lot of faith in a lot of teams, which is funny because that's what happened in the AFC a few years ago. It was the Chiefs and the Bills and anyone else kind of who bothered to show up, the Ravens, if they managed to stay healthy. And that was it. There wasn't a lot of teams that you really thought would play super well. I'm kind of feeling that way now, but with as different as last season ended up from what most expected in preseason and even after week 1. I think that's the joy of this league. It is a complete crapshoot almost week to week. And I think that's why it's so fun. And I don't know that if people don't pay very close attention outside of their home team, they would notice that as much. They would just be like here, there, oh, it's good. Or who's winning now? Or I don't even know who's playing for the AFC, that sort of thing. I think when you look at it broader, that is the fun of it, is that you never quite know what's going to happen. At least that's what keeps me coming back.
So it's really funny because I agree with you on Chicago. I'm very interested to see what Chicago does. I'm actually interested to see what the Cowboys do.
Really?
And the reason now I know it gets the same response all the time with the Cowboys. The only reason I'm interested is they have a stability situation at head coach. I think Schottenheimer actually is a good coach. As crazy as it sounds, I think he's actually a good.
Okay.
He's got some of that charisma I think that they've needed there a little bit as a coach. I also think what they've done defensively has been good, and who they've, added into the middle of that defense. I'm not saying they're going to be barn burners, but I could see them being that team that's just gets into the playoffs as a wild card and they just upset somebody that you're not expecting, because Dak Prescott isn't a horrible quarterback. They do have some weapons to use on offense. They could be that team where it's kind of like, yeah, you're that stupid annoyance that we didn't expect to be here this year, but you're here. Now, I don't think they're challenging for Seattle for being one of the top teams. I do think that really is Rams and Seattle, and who's going to win that, kind of very much like it was in 2013 with the Niners and the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Green Bay, if they can get their shit together, I think could be an interesting team. That's basically about, like, I think the Commanders, as unfortunate as I think they're going to take another step back, even with Dan Quinn there and what they're doing. I think it's just they were way too old and had kind of that Cinderella story with Jaden Daniels as a rookie, and then they haven't really fixed it in. The other team I'm interested in, though, is Tampa Bay.
Really? Why?
And the reason I say that is Baker. I'm interested to see what Baker does. Like, he played so well last year. I know they lost Mike Evans, but, they've got Mbuka, they've got McMillan coming back, they've got Godwin, but they do have some weapons there. That division is really weak. I don't expect Carolina to be the team that comes out again this year. I also think it'll be interesting to see how the Buccaneers do down there as a team, because, again, we could be talking about there could be injuries, and there always are, and all of a sudden it flips it on its head. So,
yeah.
But those are kind of some of the teams I'm just interested to keep an eye on a little bit throughout the offseason, what they do post-draft, what they draft like,
right,
and see where it is, because some of these teams, like, the Buccaneers could all of a sudden have an amazing draft, and we're going like, holy crap, like, they filled some needs, and all of a sudden they look like a completely different team. So it'll be
players on the field. That is one of their biggest obstacles, much like in San Francisco for Tampa Bay. Absolutely. So yeah, it could be. And I love Baker. I think Baker can do just about anything. So
yeah, it'll be interesting. And the only thing I'll say is I think the funniest thing, I'll say this before we go to the comments here, is two franchises I think that completely botched their opportunity to have super successful continuation plans are the Buccaneers and the Baltimore Ravens. They held on to their head coaches too long.
Yep.
Because Baltimore let Mike out of the building, and the Buccaneers let Liam Cohen out of that building.
Yep.
If the Liam Cohen and Mike McDonald are in Baltimore and in Tampa Bay respectively, I think those two teams may be better teams set up now, and may be teams that we could be saying, hey, these teams are ready to be in the cusp of the Super Bowl, than where they are currently, because they held on to John Harbaugh too long, and they held on to Todd Bowles.
It's interesting. I had a conversation just before we go about this kind of same thing with a friend at the Combine. And we were talking about how really Seattle kind of pulled the trigger and got rid of Pete before he got really bad, right? Before the team got really, really bad. They were still just kind of right there. And my friend was curious about whether or not the Ravens looked at that and they're like, okay, we're going to give him one more. If this doesn't, you know what? I know we're always in the mix, but this isn't working. And so I think that teams have a hard time, especially ownership teams, to let go of these long tenured coaches who are beloved by their fan bases and make the hard decision. And 100%, the Ravens waited 1 or 2 years too long to make that hard decision. And that's too bad. But I am very excited to see what he does with the Giants, because as the Ravens might be invigorated to and bring their standard up a little bit and play better, I think this John Harbaugh in New York is going to change the Giants completely. So it's going to be an interesting season.
It definitely is. And so now with all we've discussed, and we've had, a bunch of people in here, let's get to some of these comments in here. We got one from our moderator here, Amy Holmes. Dayna, wondering what you think about the national view of the Seahawks after the offseason free agency. Seems very much like the Geno DK debacle of last year.
So I'm not sure what you mean. So it's I think that the national view of the Seahawks is very, very favorable right now. I think that that nationally, with media, with fans, they're like, oh yeah, they're a really good team. And much like when Russell left, they're now saying that when DK and Geno left, there wasn't a hiccup there, that was meant. So I think that's what you're asking me. Please say if you're not. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I think that it's a very favorable team. Not many people hate the Seahawks outside of Green Bay, our division, and the Steelers. Other than that, I think the Steelers hate us because we made them take DK. So. Sorry, that wasn't nice.
But see, it's a love-hate relationship with the Steelers because we hate them for Super Bowl 40, so it's all even and fair now, right? So
yeah, absolutely. They got Aaron Rodgers. Ew, gross.
Yeah, and they can just enjoy DK. They wanted him so badly, and we'll take Nick Eamon-Wari and Jalen Milroe, and that was perfectly fine. We're good. Thank you so much. Exactly. We got Fab in here. Goes, it feels like a disinterest in the Seahawks in the NFL and the media, but be that way, we still don't care.
Well, I think you're 100% correct, because I think what it is that there are coaches out there who want that spotlight, who want the media around them, who thrive on that. Pete was one of them. We have a few others that are like that. That is not Mike McDonald's MO. He don't care if you pay any attention to him. All he wants to do is win.
Yeah, exactly. We've got one here from Dennis. Goes, do you both think the Hawks will trade back and try to get at least 6 picks in 6 rounds? Let you go first here, Dayna.
I think they will trade back. I don't know that they get to 6. They might. It's possible. Let me see. John Schneider is a freaking magician when it comes to these things.
Oh, I know.
I don't know that they are, unless they are certain players that are sitting there that they want to come get or can wait for or whatever. I don't know how much he's going to play in this draft, because there's just not a lot in this draft. But at the same time, Seattle just needs to use that to be their backfill. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think for me, if they're to get to 6 picks, it'll have to come off the 32nd trade where they
I think they'd trade that in a minute.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a situation where, hey, like I saw someone put out that the Steelers come up, they give him 53 and a 101 and a 104, whatever it was, and they give him 3 picks to move up. That's the situation I see where Seattle gets to potentially 6 picks. Mm-hmm. I think this is also an ideal draft to be a Super Bowl champion in and have pick 32, because I would not want to be a team with a top 5 pick in this draft.
No,
because there isn't.
Really heavy.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can look at. So it'll be interesting to see what Seattle does. I do expect John to trade, but you also got to find someone to tango with in that situation. And how many teams are going to be calling to go up to 32 in a class that's kind of look like a B- C+ kind of draft. So
right,
it'll be
offensive lineman if you're real needed there.
Hey, I have completely come to the realization that I think the best value for Seattle in the early part of this draft is to take a guard.
Yeah.
Like realistically, like if they could draft Pregnon, I would be so happy. I'd be like, perfect. You've solidified your offensive line. You've added to his strength. Now go and figure out what else you need to do.
Right. Agreed.
So we got one here again from Dennis. Goes, will D-Law let the Hawks know before the draft if he's really coming back? Everything Mike McDonald said seems like it's kind of a foregone conclusion that he's back.
Yeah, and there was an interview too with a friend of his or another player that's a friend, and he's like, oh, he's playing. So yeah. I think that he would have been respectful enough to tell them from the get if he wasn't coming back.
And I think it also shows like why they maybe weren't super in on Grenard from the Vikings and stuff, because they know they've got this kind of already, they know, and this is maybe where they look at it and go, hey, we'll take a developmental edge because we're still good at that spot with D-Law, with, Derek Hall, with Chenna, and even the whole conversation John had saying they're not going to do anything with Chenna's contract. Like, that's also a pretty good insight into the fact I think they're okay with what they're doing. We got one from Josh here. It goes, in reality, we only lost one starter last year, K9. Bryant was a starter, but Okada started more games.
Yes,
Kind of a
he
true
did.
fact.
Yeah, I think Okada started 11 games, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
My little Montana State boy. My husband got me his jersey for Christmas. I'm so excited.
And now, is it a normal blue? Is it a rival? Is it a retro? Which one is it?
No, it's the Navy. Just the
Oh.
regular Navy. I love it. Love it.
I gotta be honest, I'm a huge Ty Okada fan. I absolutely love the fact he's going to get an opportunity because I also think he's a bit more athletic than Kobe Bryant.
Okay.
And I thought he was actually a better run defender than Kobe was last year.
Yeah.
So
I'm so
it'll
proud.
be I think he's going to do quite well. It'll be interesting to see the safety room that they kind of put together now, because I don't expect Nicky Ward all of a sudden be a deep safety in this defense. I don't think that's the plan for him going forward. We got Islam here. He goes, the 2025 Seahawks should be an all-time great team. 9 combined points away from a perfect season, historic defense and special teams, and tops all-time in DVOA. Think behind the 91 Redskins and 85 Bears. There is an argument to be made. I think a fun show would be to compare 2013 to 2025 and just see how those two shape up, because
Sherman did that show.
Oh,
Sherman,
he did already.
If you go watch his podcast, I don't know if it's the whole show, but there's a segment and he talks about it. And that is the problem with this defense, is they will forever be compared to the Legion of Boom.
Yeah.
And unless they win another Super Bowl next year or even in the next couple of years, they will always get that comparison. Here is the difference. The Legion of Boom is considered one of the top 2 defenses of all time. And the reason is that because of the, how wonderful the defense was, but also because of the personalities. And unfortunately, that comes behind it. If you look at just stats, I completely agree that this team was freaking amazing. It should be considered one of the best. They do it again, it'll be right up there.
So what I will say about, if I feel like if these two teams played each other, and which I think would be really interesting, there's 2 things I give this version over the 2013 version. I think they had the edge coaching staff wise, which is saying something because that group was pretty good. I think they had the edge in the coaching staff in 2025, and I think they have the edge on the offensive side of the ball. And I think that's
completely disagree.
So, okay, this is interesting. Let's kind of unpack this a little bit here, Dayna. So you think that the 2013 offense was better than this year's offense?
Okay. Yes and no. I think they were more consistent. I think we knew exactly what to expect. I think if you looked at this offense playing against this defense, I think Russell Wilson and Doug Baldwin would have had a heyday in some of these situations. And I think Marshawn Lynch would have been a better test. Marshawn Lynch in his prime. We're not talking about Marshawn today. And so I think that would have been easy. I think been an interesting comparison. What I truly disagree with is if they played each other, who would win? I think the 13 team, the 14, that first Super Bowl team, I think that they probably would beat this team out of the absolute violence with the way they played defense. Now,
okay,
I am a little partial because I really do love the Sherman and the Chancellor, and I love all those guys. But I just think if you look at it, I think it would be close. I think that if they had time for prepare, I think you're right. Mike McDonald would figure out a way to get one over on Pete Carroll. 100%. I do totally agree with that. But I think it'd be a lot closer than that. And I think that defense, I think they would have got to Sam Darnold a little more often.
So it's funny because I look at it this way. One of Pete's kryptonites was this offense, and this offense is scheme.
True. That's very true.
Sherman tended to struggle with receivers that were elite route runners. If you look when he got stuck in those situations, when they played teams, but when they played teams that had shiftier receivers,
over his whole career, yes.
And so that's what I'm saying. JSN in his season that he just had,
it's fair,
versus Sherm could be an interesting matchup because Seattle played such a base defense at that era, right? They were a cover 3 team. They played that so well, and they were able to ad-lib a bit to the point where it got them in trouble with teams like, the Carolina Panthers with Greg Olsen down the seam. And that's where I look at this and I go, AJ Barner, this group of tight ends that they have in Seattle with Clint Kubiak, who runs an offense that's given Pete trouble with the motion and those things. I'm not saying this is a blowout by any means. I think this is a game where it's like 6-3 on field goals. I don't know if a team scores offensively.
So true.
But I also think of Darrell Bevel having to deal with Mike McDonald and the sim pressures and all those things, and Russell at that point only being in year 2 versus Sam Darnold being in year 5, 6, 7. That's where I look at it and I go, that's where I give the coaching staff edge to Mike is like that. Like I look at the Legion of Boom defense, and to your point, it will always be the iconic defense of Seattle, and the dark side will kind of always live in the shadow unless they win another one.
Right.
That's where, for me, I think it's such an interesting debate. It's one of those, like, do you remember when NFL Network would do those cool old things where they take like 2 different teams from different eras and mash them into a game, like the 49ers, the 80s versus the 70s Steelers? It'd be kind of cool to see that simulation play out between these two teams and see how it goes. Because I'm honestly, I don't think a team gets to 10 points.
I agree. I totally agree with you. And one thing about the coaching too is that Pete was so damn stubborn. He wouldn't change nothing. Like he wasn't until the 4th quarter. And Mike McDonald, he's so fluid with what he sees and what he needs. I think that he probably would eventually get the best of Pete. I don't know that he'd win the game, but he'd get the best of Pete.
And I just wonder how Russell's read option at that point, which was so good for him, would work against Tank Lawrence and Derek Hall, and this defense would be. It would be interesting to see J.R. Sweezy trying to block Big Cat. I'm just saying that'd be really interesting.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair assessment.
All right, so we got another one here from Josh. He goes, I do think the amount of offensive coaches with the offensive play calling surrounding and supporting Fleury has me not concerned. I think that's a very fair point. Like everyone that's around him now. And the ability to all speak the same language. You're not bringing in a guy that doesn't understand what Outen and Benton and all them understand. It's basically the same exact terminology, language. Maybe there's a few changes here. Blue means one thing, but blue still means this in its main premise as a word. We got one from John McGrath. He goes, we should be able to dominate defenses with our tight ends if used properly and to their full capabilities. That's a really good point. Like we could see the 3 tight end set in Seattle this year.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have to tell you, I interviewed a tight end. And of course I can't think of his name right now because I interviewed probably 300 people that day, but he's from Seattle, I asked him about the Seahawks and he would kill to play there because of the way they use their tight ends. He loves that. And so it was really cute. He got a little gushy. He was pretty happy.
Yeah. Oh man. It's going to be interesting with the tight ends. I want to see Arroyo go off so badly. I don't think he was used properly last year, and all the stuff we heard in the offseason when we drafted him. Oh, he could split out and be a receiver. I was like, sweet, we're going to see like what Jimmy Graham could potentially have been in a tight end centric offense. And it was like, oh, and then he got hurt and it was just like, oh, damn. Like,
I don't know that he was ever really healthy. So it'll be interesting to see if he's had this whole time off him as a healthy player. Yeah.
All right, Dayna. Well, we've been at this for 90 minutes, so we're going to wrap this up here. But thank you again for your time coming on here, talking the off season with me and everything like that. So what do you have going on over at Real Hawk Talk, at the Turf Podcast? Like, what do you got going on?
So I don't know that we're doing a Real Hawk Talk. I don't. It's all in the off season. I'm a little hit or miss for Real Hawk Talk, to be honest with you, because I travel quite a bit. But I will definitely be on there a couple of times in this off season. And then next Tuesday for Our Turf Football, for all of you draft freaks out there, we have Emery Hunt coming on our podcast. Now, if you don't know who Emery is, Emery has been a dear friend of mine for like 10 years. He's been coming on our show forever. So he always makes time for us right before the draft. So I'm so excited. He's going to come on. His draft guide will be dropping very soon. And he usually puts about 1,000 players in there. It's amazing what he puts in there. So we're going to have him on Tuesday and we're going to just grill him and pick his brain about this draft. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I actually have Emery coming on next week, so he'll be on here too. Good. I love Emery. I love his draft guide because the best thing I think about Emery's draft guide out of a lot of them is there are so many players you don't even think of that he grabs that end up playing in the UFL or in the CFL or all over the place because he does such a thorough job of scouting everything. So that's awesome. I'll definitely be tuning into that channel. So for anyone that's not already, head on over to Our Turf Football, subscribe to their YouTube page, watch their content. It is absolutely amazing. I'm sure a lot of you already know where Real Hawk Talk is and Brian Nimhauser and that crew over there with Hawk Blogger. So head on over there and sub up to their stuff if you haven't already, and see Dayna over there when she gets on there throughout the offseason. Over here on the Hawk side, Friday night, we're going to do a mock draft show, and I will actually have Josh from the chat here, Josh DeHuman, coming on. We're going to do a bunch of different mocks, and we're actually going to do a viewer's mock. So I will be putting polls in the chat for you guys to make the pick on the selection you want for the Seahawks at that point in time. So we'll be doing that Friday night at around 7 o'clock. So make sure you guys tune in for that. But other than that, as always, stay loud, be proud, and go Hawks. Have a good night, everybody.